Hey, everybody, welcome to the Health Coaches Podcast. I am your host, Kevin Davis, and I am joined with
Your other host, Howard Jacobson.
Howard Jacobson. How you doing today, Howie?
Pretty good, pretty good. Happy to debrief a couple of coach trainings that we did. We started seeing a similar pattern, and I thought it'd be useful to bring it to folks' attention. So when you're in the middle of it, it can feel like a sort of a trailless terrain, just going around in circles trying to help someone um, who doesn't understand what's going on. So this is a kind of a clear, quick way to get them back on track.
Yeah, yeah. So now, since we're trying to help people to be on track and focused, we should just get it out of the way up front. Howard got a new razor.
Yeah. Hey, and
For
honestly,
those that are watching on YouTube.
yeah, yeah, but I'm growing it back because my kids don't like me without a goatee. So,
No, really? Okay. I mean, the goatee looks good, but okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure that was up front so nobody is distracted by it.
okay, thank you. Yeah, we
Okay.
get all that stuff out of the way.
For sure.
So
Um,
let me describe what the thing is, and then I want to
yeah.
get your take on it. Which is, and this we're seeing a lot of this lately with the pandemic, with quarantines and lockdowns, and people working in different ways and often not going to work. Um, and so we're hearing and seeing a lot of people saying my habits have sort of slacked off or fallen apart. I'm not going to bed at night when I used to go to bed. I'm not exercising the way I was exercising before. I don't have to be out of the house at 7, so I'm not doing my 5 a.m. thing. Or, and so we're seeing a lot of people who are really confused and they're saying, well, I'm stressed out. So there must be something like going on really deep. And I know I need to do these behaviors more than ever and I'm still not doing them. And people are getting really confused and wound up in their own heads about it. And I wonder if you've seen this too, and possibly, maybe you and I have both experienced it as well.
Yeah, I definitely have, and I think actually, it's kind of interesting that I think maybe I started to recognize a little bit as even as you were describing this just now, that when we talked, was it the first episode that we talked about some of the struggles that we're going through with maintaining habits and maintaining the norm to some degree during this situation or during any situation of high stress and change was more focused on the things that we're not doing and on ourselves somewhat. Personally, it was a little bit different for me. I've got definitely a different morning routine happening. My wife is working from home, so in the morning when I get up, I've got a little bit more time before I take over with the baby and start my day. But for me, it means I do maybe some exercise or some things like that in the morning. And then I use that as an excuse to eat more or earlier than I would really like to.
Hmm.
And it's something that I just started to really recognize over the last, this week and maybe last week. And I had been, just like you mentioned, I had been just kind of ascribing that to the stress and distraction of what's going on. Obviously the first, I don't know, probably more weeks than I'd like to admit, it was like a time of, oh, watch the numbers every couple hours as they update and flip through the news things to see what do we need to be keeping up with, need to and probably overdoing it with a lot of that. And I just blamed the 5 pounds that I put on or the whatever that was on just being stressed and assuming that it was some sort of anxiety reaction and things that I'm not doing.
Right. And I had the same experience myself, and so we're both experienced coaches. And so that
Mm-hmm.
goes to this quality of human thought, and we can call it a dysfunctional thought or behavioral economics heuristic, which is we ascribe, if we're trying to explain something that's happening to us or that we're doing, we like to take charge of it. We like to take credit or blame typically, which is kind of weird. Like you'd think, well, yeah, I'd love to take the credit, but I'd love to blame someone else or something else.
I think there's just a tendency toward control. We want to be in control, even if it is, in control of this train as we run it off the tracks.
Yeah.
At least we're the ones in control.
Or at least even like people feel out of control, but it's paradoxically, well, at least I'm the one who's out of control.
Yeah.
And it's the situation is so overwhelming. And so people are looking inwardly, like the basic question that gets triggered is what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And for all of us, and you and I have talked about trauma a lot, that when we have a trauma that has not been fully healed, any situation that reminds you of that trauma will trigger it. So just like you were unable to go to movie theaters after your PTSD because it reminded you of being stuck in a car with a burning engine and a seatbelt that wouldn't release, for a lot of people, being stuck at home or food insecure or future insecure, career insecure, relationship insecure can bring up a lot of this stuff. And so when that happens, one of our go-tos is self-blame, right? Because it's easier to blame ourselves than to blame the caregivers when we were a year old and we had to depend on them. Like it was more important that they be solid than us be solid. Because if we're not solid, we can still survive. If they're not solid, then we're messed up.
Yeah.
Right? And so like what came to me is in doing the coaching and the coach training over the last couple of days is in both cases of the people who had problems. One person, their exercise routine had gone to shit. Another person had stopped their bedtime routine. And the way the coaches, and these are new trainees, and the way they first approached it was, well, what do you think is going on? Or have you lost your motivation? And why is this important to you? And these turned out to be not just dead ends, but kind of damaging, dangerous places to go because they were reinforcing the negative story that there's something wrong with my head.
Well, and then by doing that, we're looking at all of these bits of information and of story that are all around the situation, but without ever finding out the details of what's actually happening. Because it's like when you get those details, then all of a sudden this just becomes much more simple.
Right. And so can you describe like the one you were on last night without naming any names or invading any privacy? Like what were the details that made it so darn easy to fix when we got curious about them?
Yeah, so the one that was last night was the one where we were talking about sleep and kind of getting that routine back to what had worked previously. And of course, the tendency of the coaches who spoke first, and honestly the tendency of any of us naturally is, oh well, what happened, what do you think maybe led to this? But and of course, so we danced around this for a while. When we stopped and got curious about the specifics of the situation, all of a sudden it is, well, what were you doing before that led to you getting into that routine or beginning that nighttime routine? And it was as simple as having an alarm go off. And as soon as we found that out, then the next question is, well, is the alarm still going off? And basically we were just about done. Like everything was pretty much solved with just that simple discovery of, one little habit, one little portion of the environment that was changed.
Right. And so, the context of last night's training was about curiosity.
Yes.
And what I realized is that there's multiple things to be curious about. And coaches are naturally curious. But I think we're often curious about things that don't help. Like we're fascinated by the inner workings of the human mind. And that ends up often being a rabbit hole when we want to get fascinated by the movie.
Yes.
right? Like what? So when somebody says, well, this is what's happening, and they're doing it in generalities, and they're just telling us a story about this is typically how it goes, we have nothing to work with. But when we
Mhm.
ask them, like, I want to be a fly on the wall, take me through it. What happened last night where you stayed up and scrolled Instagram until 2 a.m.? Show me. I want to be able to see the movie. Like, that's the kind of curiosity that leads to breakthroughs.
Yeah, and I mean, literally, at time, well, commonly at times we will say, show me the movie. If I were to watch the movie of this and narrow it down, you mentioned, what happened last night versus, someone saying, well, generally I'll do things like XYZ. You want to know what happened at this specific time. The other, I feel like the alternate type of curiosity that we all started with, particularly in this example that we're talking about, was a type of curiosity where we are asking questions simply to try and discover a solution
Mm-hmm.
rather than asking, the questions that give us the description of what is happening, which I think then leads to a solution actually, more often than not.
Yeah, yeah, you can feel that the when we feel the need to come up with a solution, that our curiosity gets tangled
Mm-hmm.
in our ego, and so we have a bias towards nailing down the butterfly.
Mm-hmm.
Oh look, I just discovered my mic was all the way over there.
Ooh, wow, you sound beautiful now.
Unbelievable. So that's what this thing is. Yeah. See, now we could have had a long conversation about like my inner state and why I wasn't projecting, but all I had to do was swing the damn mic arm a foot and a half, and now I sound better.
Did you plan that?
I did not. I'm not that good, or or I am that bad.
Yeah,
All
you're
right.
just good enough.
So I would say, I mean, to me, that is the biggest difference between a pro and an amateur coach, is that the
Mm-hmm.
amateur is asking about generalities in order to brainstorm the solution.
Mm-hmm.
And the pro is willing to write it out with true curiosity about what's actually happening. What is the real situation on the ground that we're dealing with, not just accepting the story that the client is cobbling together for their own understanding and ours. Because in that story are baked in assumptions that they're making, and we're adding our own assumptions to it. So in the case of last night, the assumption all of us were making was when this person was talking about going to bed and scrolling Instagram, was that they were scrolling Instagram in bed. They were sitting there with
Yep.
their phone in bed, because that's how I would do it.
Yep.
And it turns out, without getting into any detail, that they were in a different room and had to put the phone down and decide to come to bed. And all of a sudden, that opened up an entirely different set of possibilities for the coach and for the client.
And, to be just, fully open and full disclosure on this is someone who we've known for quite a while and who we've worked with in the past. And so you and I, Howard, having been through a related conversation to this last year with the same person, still were under the assumption that it was in the bed. Even though, so that kind of reflects that we didn't get to that part of the detail in, the conversation months ago. And so, to your point about the pro versus the amateur coach and what sort of curiosity and questioning you do, I think there's a pro and an amateur in all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to tap into that pro part. Because I was thinking for myself today, we talked right before we got on this podcast that I've had just kind of a hectic day, things going back to back. And I think if I had gone into a session like that, coaching that person, and just jumped right in a few minutes ago without any kind of stop, without any kind of, deep breaths or anything to ground myself, I probably would have done the same thing.
Yep. Well,
Or
yeah,
maybe not even as good as that.
yeah. Well, the amateur is our default,
Yeah.
right? Because there's nothing wrong with being an amateur coach if you're an amateur coach, right?
Yeah.
This is how so maybe putting a post-it on your computer or on your desk saying, "Can I see the movie?"
Oh yeah.
Right. Because because we all catch ourselves and go and take 4 steps back in a coaching session and say, "Oh, you know what? I totally forgot this principle." But the more we do it, the more it starts feeling bad that we haven't done it. It's like it's like noon and you haven't brushed your teeth. And you're like, "What's that? What's that film?"
I, I'm getting the feeling that you haven't been brushing your teeth lately.
Yeah, well, we're
Um,
not going to talk about that. It's a theme here. I've just, I found the pressure washer. All right, so it's.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, no, I do. I
Um,
do brush my teeth.
yeah, good. But I really like the idea that you had there of putting, a note, a sticky note, or whatever it is on your computer, or on your phone, saying, "Hey, do this. Hey, remember this. Am I being
Mhm.
curious? Am I get watching the movie?" Because that's actually something that, whether it's this specific point or some other reminder that you need to be the pro version of yourself, that's an incredible way to be able to simply just keep it, as long as you don't end up with your screen all covered in notes and then you are so distracted that you can't coach the person.
Right. Yeah. You got to keep them small. But like I got this from I took a podcasting course from Alex Blumberg of National Public Radio, great
Yeah.
podcaster. And in the course, he starts out by he's introducing the course and saying, "Here I am with my microphone and my recorder under the blanket." So that I don't get it, so I don't have any echoing. I'm in my apartment and I'm under the blanket. And that was a recording that he played for the class. And then he said, "Okay, now raise your hand if you can see the blanket." And everybody raised their hands like, "Oh yeah, like what is it? What's the blanket?" Oh, someone said it's like fuzzy and blue. Someone else said it's one of those camping blankets. Someone else said it's like a duvet or a comforter. And the point is, everybody, our brain fills in all these lacunae, to use a fancy word that I looked up once. The lacuna is literally the blind spot in your eye, like the thing, right, that we all have a blind spot and we sort of see around it or fill in what's not there. And we do the same thing with our minds. Now, for radio, for a drama, that's very useful because each of us can draw our own connection to it. But when we're coaching someone, we don't want to impose our own understandings of the world. We don't want to fill in their gaps with our assumptions because we're going to miss the important details that will lead to breakthroughs.
And I would almost add to that, even that a major part of our job as the coach is to fill in and help them see their blind spot. So if
Mm.
we're so busy taking that blind spot and filling it with our own crap, whatever's in our head, whatever assumptions we have, whatever blue blanket that we see, that it completely crowds out whatever, purple polka dotted blanket that they see, that could totally get in the way. And so our goal is to ask them, okay, what is all the detail?
That's so true. I'm glad you said that because the breakthrough doesn't occur when we see what's going on. It's when they hear themselves say what's actually going on. And you can see it. And like, there's this moment, there's sort of this sheepish smile where they say, "Oh, so that's when I reach for the ice cream. That's when I scroll the Instagram. That's when I decide to stay in instead of go out for a walk. Oh." And then it's almost like, "Oh, well, it's obvious what I need to do. Like, see you later."
Well, into the story, the example that we've used from last night, that was the smile, the energy shift, the face that we saw when the question about the alarm came up. It was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Right.
And then you even, Howard asked, like, "So do you know what you need to do now?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's just the alarm."
Right.
As simple as that.
Right. And so that, the other thing it's not on topic for today, but that moment doesn't happen unless we have created rapport and safety
Right.
because the person is now, copping to something. They're revealing something. They've been found out. And if they don't feel safe with us, they won't reveal it. They won't allow themselves to even notice it. So, I think that might be a wrap for today.
I think that was beautiful.
All right. Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers or Mr. Jacobson, whatever we're going with here.
Just call me Mike.
Oh,
Ruffone.
It's funny because we had our little Mr. Rogers moment before we started recording, and I think we decided that our whether he exists or not, our producer is named Roger. So,
Roger that. That's his last
yeah,
name.
Roger Rogers.
No, just Roger that.
Oh, Roger that. Okay.
Yeah.
I hope people like hearing us banter about silly things.
Well, it's at the end, so
Yeah, they could always click stop.
they
If you don't
played
like
it.
us, click stop.
Yeah. All right, man. I'll banter with you next time.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks very much. And everybody, thank you so much for listening. I hope this was helpful, and we will talk to you soon.